today's Toy Spot, we're having a look at the NECA Toys Heroes of the Storm, Terror of Darkshire, Stitches. Stitches is the deluxe figure from the other figures that we've been having a look at from the Heroes of the Storm line. Comes to us from the folks over at NECA Toys, recommended for ages 14 and up. It's hard to kind of gauge it by packaging, but it looks like, based on artwork, that he might actually have a secondary arm that sticks out from the back of him. But even not even seeing like everything that we're going to be seeing when we get him out of packaging, he really looks awesome. I love the stitch work. I love how he has the open area of his stomach. Very excited about getting this guy opened up. The side of the box features the artwork of Stitches. And I guess that is the figure, so really it does technically show that he's got a secondary arm behind him as well. And finally on the back, the other figures that we've already had a look at was Arthas and Tyrael. And the read-up says, take care when traversing the shadowed trails of Duskwood. Ever since Abercrombie the Embalmer unleashed his abomination upon Darkshire, Stitches has wandered the road, aimlessly hungering for the flesh of low-level Alliance players. Very cool. You can check out more from NECA Toys by going to www.necaonline.com. Spot's going to take a break and get this opened up. But when we come back, we're going to get a better look at the Terror of Darkshire, Stitches. There's more heading away, guys. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. For your list of accessories, Stitches does come with a fair bit. For starters, he kind of comes with a hook sickle that, according to the packaging, or at least the box art on the back of the packaging, it looks like it's intended for his smaller arm. So I'll show you guys that in a second. They all have a metallic look to them, although they've been given like almost like a dark, I would guess say more of a closer to a gold wash that's been added to the blade. The handle is more wood, and you just unpeg that to slide it through his hand, and you peg it off on the bottom, and you're good to go. So he does come with that. He comes also with this extremely large cleaver. Very light, actually. This is very kind of a hollow feeling cleaver. So at least it doesn't weigh him down, because if you gave him a solid plastic cleaver, it'd be a little harder for him to wield, but this is nice and light. Again, the handle does unpeg, as you are going to be sliding it through his larger arm, or hand, and then just close that back up. This one, unlike the hook, is a little more blood-soaked, if I may. I wonder how many poor players have suffered the fate of Stitches here. But it also has that, maybe it's not so much gold, maybe it's just like a dirty kind of wash that they've added to it. Like it's just aged, maybe it's rusted. Very nice though. And we'll put that to the side. And finally, he has a ball and chain, or I guess a hook and chain. A very similar hook to the smaller one that he's got for his arm. The very large, very broad, again very light, and it's got individual links to it, which is also very nice. It's got a weighted bottom to it as well, but it appears that he seems to hold it by holding it through the chains rather than the bottom base of the hook. Very nice looking accessories. I'll be displaying them very likely also with the accessories rather than without. But in the meantime, let's put those to the side, because I want to show you this just stunning looking figure. You want to talk getting your money's worth. This is a figure that you would be getting your money's worth. There is a lot going on with this figure. He is also apparently nude. But all these little gashes, I mean, again, he's a very heavy looking figure. You know what? Let's start with his face. Let's start with his face. We'll work our way down. The face is very ogre-like, I guess. He's blue in complexion, and again, he's got all these stitches running around his chest, his arms, his shoulders, his hands, and even down to his legs. He's got a couple of stitches around his mouth area as well. He does have a tongue, and you can open up the mouth. Not by much, just that's enough. That's as far as you can do it. But he does have a little tongue inside his mouth, and he's got all this like gross green slime. That's quite nice. If you look actually at his tummy, where his organs and intestines are also hanging out, it is covered in that same sort of green slime. An interesting little thing to note as well is that his stomach, I was going to keep calling his tummy, His stomach is wrapped by these teeth, and teeth on the side there. Presuming that this is probably a secondary mouth. Again, I have not played the game, but presuming that this is probably a secondary mouth of some sort. Very interesting. None of these are soft or plastic. These are all a hard plastic, and it looks like they've actually been sculpted to his stomach as well. Let's move the camera back a little bit. He's got one large arm, one very large arm, and then he's got a slightly smaller arm. This one has a hinge in the elbow, whereas this one does not. This one's just solid, just one solid sculpt. However, he does have the rotation in the forearm, whereas this one has it more at the elbow area. Going down to his feet, he kind of, again, looks like Frankenstein's monster creation, as he has all these different colored limbs. Very successful. Even like looking at the larger arm compared to his torso is a lighter blue. The man boob area is a lighter color, matching that of his hands and matching that of the one leg. But then he's got a lighter blue that matches, again, like it's a crisscross mixed match of just different body parts, I guess, presumably. And I guess it's safe to assume that this was not his original arm. This is probably someone's poor arm that's just got added to the mix of it. Here's the back of it. An open gashed area where you can see his spinal cord. A couple of gashed open areas there on his chest or on his shoulder. And this would need medical attention. It looks like he hasn't quite had enough skin to cover over the leg portion of it, or it's been maybe separated itself from the rest of its body. Stitches all in his legs. Very gross feet. One larger foot, one smaller foot. I mean, he is truly a Frankenstein's monster of just parts. Really a gorgeous looking guy, though. Like, not gorgeous in the sense like, oh, I would take him out, to the prom, or I'd bring him home to meet my parents, but from the standpoint of just a really awesome figure, I mean, it doesn't get any more awesome than this. It's just it's like a cross between like Jabba the Hutt and Ogre and Frankenstein, just all amalgamated into this, and it is gorgeous. Before we put all the accessories into his different hands, and he's got 3 of them, let's cover his articulation. His head does rotate. It does have a ball joint that moves up and down as well. We've already looked at the jaw, which opens and closes. This particular shoulder is on a hinge, but if you see, there's a hinge right at the top area, which is a very familiar type of hinge that would normally be found in the elbow. So he does have a hinge here, but he doesn't have a rotation here, likely because of the way everything's been sculpted. He does have a rotation in the forearm here, and he does have a hinge here, but it's a little bit smaller, and you can't get as much movement out of the arm. A rotation in the hand, which also hinges at the hand. This hand's kind of cool because it's got just like it's got sores, and it's discolored in yellow. It looks like it's got more of tribal work to it as well. As for this smaller arm, it hinges. It also rotates. He does have a bend in the elbow, a rotation in the forearm area, and it doesn't look like he's got a rotation in the hand, but for how much you're actually getting just from that, that's pretty good. This arm, on the other hand, oh, you see what I did there on the other hand, has the ball hinge joint at the top here rather than further down. It rotates. He does have a rotation in the elbow area, which also bends, which is a little stiffer. He has a rotation in this hand, which also hinges. He has an upper torso ball joint. He has ball joint legs, ball joint lower legs, and hinged feet. Proportionately, because he is kind of just a very beefy, portly fellow, you have to kind of offset some of the weight. You have to make sure that you properly distribute it. So you might have to move his legs just a little bit to kind of get him to properly stand. Maybe standing him on a hard surface may not be as much of a trick. There we go. Again, you might want to just make sure that that one leg is slightly more bent. It seems to kind of hold his proportions pretty good. Let's go ahead as best we can and try to get the accessories into his hand as well. I'm going to slide that in first and just peg off the end. Here we go. Let's go ahead and grab his cleaver, and we'll slide that into his hand as well. And of course peg off this one is a little more difficult because you have to kind of get in behind his hand to peg that into place. There we go. And then lastly, his chain kind of just sits inside his hand. And for that, you might want to just move his thumb just out of the way to get this properly into his hand. And I find just kind of prying the hand just a little bit, pry it just before you're going to put the chain into his hand. And this, I kind of said the cleaver was the hardest part. The hardest part is actually getting him to hold his chain, unless you just kind of drape it inside his thumb. And just drape that inside his hand. The chain is probably the little harder of the piece to get him to hold properly, but everything comes together quite nicely. Maybe I might not even display him with the chain, I'm not quite sure. The cleaver and the hook kind of does a good enough job. Not to say that he's not imposing enough, really, without the accessories. Let's reach off camera to have a look at the other figures that we had to look at, just to kind of give you a scale comparison. There is Arthas, and the first figure that we had to look at was Tyrell. I guess proportionately, if I can get everything to stand properly. There we go. Stitches is not really that much taller. He's just actually a hair bit taller than the other figures, but certainly where he makes up for it is just size. He's just so much bigger than the other figures. Maybe while you weren't perhaps crazy with Arthas, or perhaps crazy with Tyrell, I think certainly from a horror fan, even if you didn't follow the Heroes of the Storm, Stitches just brings a lot to the table for a Frankenstein's beast of a monster. I think he would look exceptional on a shelf, and as soon as I'm finished this review, I've got a good place on my shelf where this guy is going to sit. Today's Toy Spot, we were having a look at the Heroes of the Storm from NECA, today at Stitches. Stay tuned, guys. Spot's going to have more Toy Spots heading your way. Thanks for watching as you always do. I'll see you next time.